even an old guy like me can still get a lot of these questions right just by thinking through the question, not throwing up a block of, I don't understand this, I don't remember this, I don't know these words, and just trying to be positive and go, hey, let's see if I can figure it out. Ali, welcome back to the MCAT podcast. How you doing, my friend?
I am doing great. Glad
Awesome.
to be back.
Awesome.
Love being here.
I don't know if I can say the same. I hate the MCAT, and I don't like doing these, especially publicly, where I get to show students. Sometimes I lose all of my logic and reasoning skills. But hey, I do my best, and hopefully
you're doing great.
hopefully it's helping someone out there. And I love getting, if this is helping you, I love getting DMs and emails and stuff saying, hey, Dr. Gray, I got a 525. And I basically just listen to the podcast. So send those kind messages and give me some motivation if you want. So we are getting close to wrapping up the half-length diagnostic from Blueprint MCAT, which everyone gets for free with a free account over at blueprintmcat.com. We are in the Psych Soc section, Passage 5. So if you want to follow along, go get that free half-length diagnostic, and hopefully you get all of the questions right as we go through this.
Let us get started with this passage. It looks like we have a figure in the bottom, so we might have some sort of an experiment. There's a bullet point list in the middle, so this might be interesting. So always good to get a quick scan of the passage, determine, well, is this a research style or just textbook style? This one looks like more closer to research than textbook.
Okay.
All right, antisocial personality disorder is a chronic mental condition in which a person's ways of thinking, perceiving situations, and relating to their peers are dysfunctional and destructive. People with antisocial personality disorder typically have no regard for right and wrong and often disregard the rights, wishes, and feelings of others. Several traits necessary to assess antisocial personality disorder have been identified. So we can see that we have a list of these traits. And before we go over them, Ryan, so would you pay too much attention to each one of these bullet points?
Probably not, because it's laid out there nice for me, and I can reference them if I need to.
Exactly. Perfect. And this is also back at the background. This is a list of symptoms or list of behaviors that we use to identify the antisocial personality disorder. But it's part of the background and not of our research. Right?
Mm.
So looking for that hypothesis. So I'm going to go quickly through these.
Okay.
Superficial charm, greatly inflated idea of one's ability and self-esteem and a sense of superiority. There might be some content connecting to this about like self-worth, self-efficacy, self-esteem. So might come up in a question, but not dwelling on this. Pathological lying, manipulative use of deceit to cheat others of personal gain, lack of remorse or guilt, limited range or depth of feelings, callous/lack of empathy, failure to accept responsibility for own actions. All right, we have this list. Fine, it's there. If I have a question, we're still looking for that hypothesis or at least the purpose of the experiment.
Okay.
Despite their antisocial behavior, many criminals do not fit the description of antisocial personality disorders. The disorder has both biological and psychological roots. All right, good. So this might be worth highlighting. Medicine is going into this like biopsychosocial approach of viewing disease. So AMC is kind of like invested in you knowing this. So I will highlight this as an important factor. So we're looking for two factors going forward.
Mm-hmm.
No single gene codes for such a complex behavior, but some studies have detected early signs of antisocial behavior. Figure 1 below shows the results of an experiment performed to measure levels of the hormone adrenaline in two groups of boys at age 15. So doesn't say explicitly what's the purpose of the experiment, but it seems that they want to measure if adrenaline is different with like criminals versus no criminals.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's look at figure 1 and tell me, what do you see here?
So adrenaline excretion as the y-axis here. The black boxes being no criminal record. And the big thing I see here in this non-stressful situation, it's interesting that the no criminal record has twice as much, based on this y-axis, adrenaline excretion in non-stressful situations. I don't know if I would have assumed that. I would assume like the criminal record people would be kind of excited all the time in any level. So
it's the opposite.
Yeah, so it's the opposite of what I assumed. So I'll keep looking at that. But then the same thing in stressful situation, right? The no criminal record has more adrenaline excretion, although not double like in the non-stressful situation. So I would go, oh, okay, maybe it's the no criminal record people, they're staying out of trouble because their adrenaline goes and they don't like that feeling, and so they back away. Whereas the criminal record people aren't as phased, and they're like, oh, like this is a normal response for me doing bad things. And so that would be a quick little potential hypothesis I would make. If that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, we can see that adrenaline level is lower, so arousal is lower with these individuals. It's, again, not what I expected when I was reading the passage, but it's something to note if it comes up in a question. Now, we're not given statistical significance in the figure, so let's keep reading. Maybe we can get some verification of the results.
Okay.
In both stressful and non-stressful situations, those who acquired a juvenile criminal record as 12 to 15 years old showed comparatively low arousal. All right, so they kind of confirmed what we got from the figure, and like kind of made the conclusion. So even though the figure did not give me statistical significance, I'm now prepared to answer whenever I get a question to say, well, it was lower for individuals with a criminal record.
Yeah.
Genetics alone cannot tell the whole story. Relative to 1955, the average American in 2005 was twice as likely to be murdered, 4 times as likely to be robbed, and 5 times more likely to be assaulted. Yet the human gene pool had hardly changed. So that's kind of an interesting thought in here. So whenever we have behaviors, like if I'm studying behavior, there are 2 competing kind of like hypotheses or reasons for the behavior. Could be genetic and could be environmental. So the figure is telling me, well, their adrenaline level is different. That's a biological reason. Might not be necessarily genetic, but there's biological basis, a difference in their biology. But that last paragraph is suggesting that, well, our genes did not change in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
And yet the crime rate has increased much. So it must be more environmental than genetic.
Yeah.
Now, honestly, here in the back of my mind, before I go to the question, I just know that if they ask me to prove or disprove any of this in any of the questions, think about twin studies.
Okay.
Whenever they tell you, like, is it genetic? Is it environment? The answer has to deal with twins. Okay. Because if I want to prove that it's genetic, I need to look at 2 twins, that identical twins who grew up apart but ended up in like the similar outcome. Both were big criminals or both were non-criminals.
Yeah.
Versus if I want to say environmental, 2 twins raised apart, different SES maybe, or different families. One turned up a criminal, one turned up like attorney general or something. So this is the type of proof for these skill 3 questions, like propose an experiment or what would sway one or like the conclusion one way or the other.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. So let's go and attack those questions.
All right. So pretty straightforward passage. So I'm a little worried about the questions, but we'll see. Question 24. Which conclusion, all right, so we were just kind of assuming some conclusions here, is supported by figure 1? A, boys with a criminal record have no autonomic response to stress. Okay, I don't think it says that. It just seems a little bit less, right? So that's a little too extreme for me to be the right answer. B, boys with no criminal record will respond to stress by secreting a lower total level of autonomic hormones than boys with a criminal record. I think that was the opposite of what we saw, potentially. hopefully. So C, boys with no criminal records have lower resting levels of adrenaline. Okay, so again, I don't think that was what we saw in the figure. So I'm going to ignore that one. D, boys with a criminal record will secrete a lower total level of autonomic hormones in stressful situations than boys without one. And I think that's what we saw. Now, I'm kind of scared because it's talking about autonomic hormones. And I'm like, well, is adrenaline an autonomic hormone? And now I'm like, uh-oh, are they trying to mess with me using these different words? And so I'm going to throw out A and C. And I look at B and D, and they are exact opposites, I think, of what it is. So, boys with no criminal record will secrete a lower total level, and boys with a criminal record will secrete. I'm kind of scared, and I have to make the guess that when they say autonomic hormones, that they are talking about adrenaline and they're just using a different word. So I'm going to go with D.
Perfect. Yes. So the autonomic nervous system is both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. That sympathetic is mediated through usually epinephrine, norepinephrine. It's both a nervous system, autonomic nervous system pathway, and it could be also hormonal via the adrenal medulla. So that's perfect. And this is like, for our viewers, this is content you need to know for the MCAT, that we have two stress responses. One is chronic, and it's mediated by cortisol secreted by the adrenal cortex. And one is more acute response to stress, which is what's being tested in here, which mediated by the autonomic nervous system via adrenaline and noradrenaline, or epinephrine, norepinephrine.
Yeah. All right. That one scared me for a second. So 25.
All right. It is found that some people who suffer from antisocial personality disorder had trouble with speech comprehension as children. What brain area is likely associated with this difficulty?
All right, so answer choice A, somatosensory cortex, B, Wernicke's area, C, occipital lobe, or D, basal ganglia. A couple weeks ago, we had Broca's. The person had trouble getting the words out, and Wernicke's is the opposite of that, understanding speech. So pretty simple, straightforward, pseudo-discrete here. Answer choice B, Wernicke's is welcoming words. Wernicke's welcoming words in.
Love this.
I just thought of that one.
Yeah. So it's like we said on that last question, whenever you hear speech, you need to think Broca's and Wernicke. And Broca's is not one of the answer choices, then your choice is very easy here. If you're given both, then you have to go with Wernicke's, obviously, because this is not about speech production. This is about comprehension. So we have to go with B.
Yep. All right. Question 26. A woman walking to work sees a group of people on the street staring at an open manhole. She stops to join them in staring down at the open manhole. Her behavior is an example of... So this is funny. This is... I always think of people looking up in the sky, and everyone's like, what are they looking at? And everyone starts to look. So we have A, the bystander effect. I don't... Like, this is, I think, a popular one that everyone understands, where you see something going on, and you're like, there are other people that'll handle that, so I'm not going to do anything. So I'm going to ignore that one. B, de-individuation. Seems a little strong potentially for this. C, conformity. Okay, right. You're conforming to what they're doing. Or D, groupthink. Again, I go back to, I don't remember all of the strict definitions of these. Can we potentially work our way through it and go, okay. So bystander effect, I think, is the only one I know isn't right, I hope. B, de-individuation is... and I can talk myself into A, going, oh, well, if it's an open manhole, someone should be covering it, and no one's covering it, and I'm not going to cover it because I assume someone else is going to cover it, right? So I could potentially talk my way into the bystander effect, but I'm going to hopefully avoid that and go, it's too much of a stretch to get there.
Yes.
De-individuation, again, I don't remember what that means, but it seems too strong of a word of like, oh, I don't don't consider myself a person anymore because I'm looking at this manhole. I assume potentially that's kind of what it means. Conformity, I think, seems like the most obvious of like, oh, I'm
Yes.
conforming to what's going on, versus groupthink is the way I think, right? And I think I'm going to avoid that one because I think maybe it's a little bit stronger of everyone thinks that, everyone I work with is a Republican, I'm a Democrat, but I'm going to start thinking like a Republican. Maybe that's more groupthink. So I'm going to go with C because I think it's the most obvious one.
Yes, and it is the most obvious, and it is the correct one. And this topic, we call them social actions or social phenomena, is tricky because knowing the differences between just like conformity, which is more of a general term, and then groupthink, the individuation, the bystander effect, group polarization, peer pressure, social loafing, or social facilitation. There's a bunch of them, and sometimes the difference between one or the other is very, very small. Like the difference, like groupthink, a lot of our students would fall for groupthink or even the individuation, which is what you said, like it's too strong for this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So for this question, let's go through them one by one.
Okay.
And we'll try to rule out A, B, and D. The bystander effect is exactly what you described. Is a bunch of people walking, there's somebody fell down, or there's a manhole that's open, or there's a situation where someone has to call 911. And in a group, people are less likely to act, especially if the group is big, because they're assuming somebody else will call 911. Somebody else will have will help the old lady who fell down the stairs. It's just because of the presence of others. So our behavior is dictated by the presence of others, even though we're not really interacting with these other people.
Yeah.
De-individuation could be applied here if the situation, like if you didn't just look at a manhole. So the individuation is when we lose our identity and take on the group, the identity of the group, right? So like, for example, let's say you're leaving a football game and like people are rioting. Your friends are rioting, everybody, and you take on the identity of the group and you join the rioting. You're not really, like, it's not you anymore. It's the mob. You're part of the mob instead of you being yourself. So in this case, this individual looked at a manhole because other people were looking. This is not like I lost my identity to the group.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if they were like suddenly were breaking into dance and then she like forgets she has a meeting and then she started dancing with them, that would be more the individuation.
Okay.
Then groupthink. Groupthink deals with making decisions as a group. So it does not apply to this current situation. So groupthink, let's say you're working with your staff on making a new podcast or new podcast ideas. And like if your staff members stop challenging you and only present evidence that will only support your decisions and your ideas, and you can see that they, instead of trying to come up with, oh, what I think is best, they will say, oh, what will create less friction in this group, and let me present only evidence that Ryan is right, or the common, like the consensus is right.
Yeah.
This would be groupthink.
Yeah.
So,
do you know, Ali, do you know how I avoid groupthink as a leader?
Yeah.
With my team? How do I avoid groupthink? What's a common way for leaders? Good leaders do this.
I'm not sure. So I'm interested to know.
So whenever we're working as a team and we have a dilemma in front of us, I will never give, or I try not to, my thoughts. I want everyone else to give their thoughts before I share my thoughts, because I don't want people to just agree with me.
That's great. That's a great approach to minimize groupthink.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, I can't avoid it between like the rest of my team, of like if someone says something else and the other person goes, oh, well, I really like that, and it's very different than mine, so I'm not going to say mine, right? I can't avoid it between everyone else. But for as like the leader part, at least I'm trying to help.
That definitely reduces it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. In general, like we're looking for group size, like bigger group size, probably like higher probability of groupthink, and uniformity with the group and group cohesion. Like something like everyone is the same race, or everyone is the same gender, everyone is the same age. This increases groupthink.
Yeah.
All right. So, great job so far.
So, last one, I believe. Which organ? All right. So this is an interesting passage because most of these questions are pseudo-discretes. Question 27. Which organ is associated with the hormone response monitored in the experiment discussed in the passage? All right. So we are talking about adrenaline, right? The autonomic nervous system, adrenaline, norepinephrine. So we have A, kidneys, B, adrenal glands, C, thymus, or D, amygdala. And I'm pretty sure it's B, adrenal glands.
Perfect. Yes. I kind of spoiled it a bit earlier. Fun fact about this, for those of us listening in, the most of our endocrine glands, they come from the mesoderm,
Yep.
Their germ layer origin is the mesoderm. But we talked about the adrenaline response, the sympathetic response, as both hormonal and nervous.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the adrenal medulla is actually used to be, or at least it evolved from a sympathetic ganglion. So it is actually not derived from the mesoderm, like the adrenal cortex. It's actually derived from the ectoderm, like the rest of the nervous system.
Wow.
So it's an endocrine gland that's very similar, or actually it has neurons and it's part of the nervous system. That not currently, but it evolved from nervous system tissue. So that's why it's ectoderm.
Very cool. Let's go through the other answer choices here to see potentially where they may come into play. So kidneys, what is anything secreted by the kidneys? I don't.
So the renin-angiotensin system is in the kidney, and but I think it's a trick answer choice in here because the adrenals sit on top of the kidney. So they're kind of trying to confuse you on location, just like, oh, it's right there, it's right next to it.
Okay. Thymus.
Thymus, this is where it's known for the MCAT, the fun fact or the fact about thymus, this is where T cells mature.
Okay. So part of the immune response, system.
Yeah.
Okay. And amygdala.
Amygdala is part of the brain. It's involved in the fear response and memory of, or emotional memory.
Yep.
So it makes the neurotransmitters, it doesn't make hormones.
Yeah. All right. Pretty straightforward. So again, hopefully the goal of these podcasts with me trying to answer these questions is showing people, even an old guy like me can still get a lot of these questions right just by thinking through the question, not throwing up a block of, I don't understand this, I don't remember this, I don't know these words, and just trying to be positive and go, hey, let's see if I can figure it out.